Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon to talk about the future of crypto regulation. My name is Sarah Milby. I'm head of policy at Blockchain Association. It's a trade association based in Washington, D.C. We represent about 100 companies who are all in the crypto space, basically representing their interests in Washington, D.C. in front of regulators and lawmakers. And I'm joined here today by Kevin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Wysocki with Anchorage Digital. We're a crypto platform that provides custody, staking, trading, settlement, and governance services. We're also known as the first and only federally chartered digital asset bank in the United States, and we recently announced a unhosted wallet called Porto for institutions.
I feel like we'll just dive into the conversation.
Sounds good.
It might be helpful to give a little bit of a landscape of how, to date, the crypto industry has interacted with the government. I think there are three main facets the way that the industry is really trying to put forward a good amount of education. We're trying to highlight use cases, and we're even trying to do a continued engagement by meeting with different staff and members of Congress themselves. I think the most important part of our job is education. This is a very complicated space. I think that people don't really understand blockchain, let alone crypto. So it's our job to try to go in, especially when there's new legislation being crafted, to try to explain what that legislation's effect would be on the industry, particularly through the lens of how the technology works. The other part is use cases. So in part through the education, it's highlighting what use cases would be affected, but it's also, I think, trying to show members of Congress why they need to care about the space. I think right now, a lot of people on the Hill kind of give a shoulder shrug when we talk about crypto and see it as something that bad actors use for nefarious purposes. They see it as like a fraud scheme. They can, connect it with FTX. So it's interesting to see, too, how when we bring really interesting use cases to the light in front of these Congress people, how it can change their minds about their approach to regulating the space. And then the last one is just continued engagement. We're having conversations with the staff and the members themselves, really trying to make sure that when it comes time to vote or write pieces of legislation, that they're in a good position to do so. So I'm curious, Kevin, why you think there hasn't really been any crypto regulation or legislation written to date?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sarah. Honestly, it's really difficult to move legislation in Congress. Many times it takes many years, 4 to 5 years to move it. And then when you're talking about crypto, you're talking about new technology and a lot of existing laws, whether it's security, banking, illicit finance, that are all part of the conversation here. So members want to get it right. But they also want to make sure that it's going to work for the long term. So I think you've seen a number of bills that have been put out there, and there's been a lot of work done over the last few years, and we're making progress. But there's still more that needs to be done in the near future. Really quickly, I just want to say, 9 years ago when I was on the Hill, I remember a couple of members put together some meetings with industry, and they invite other members to start the education process on blockchain. Now, on Capitol Hill, we have hearings almost every week, sometimes multiple hearings per week. We have multiple digital asset subcommittees in Congress. There is staff exclusively focused on crypto in Congress. Things have really changed, and it's starting to bear fruit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that everyone talks about in DC is clarity, especially when it comes to crypto. Some people wonder whether or not there's already clarity, trying to fit crypto into old laws, trying to figure out new laws in order to kind of bridge the gap in different kinds of jurisdictional issues between agencies like the SEC and CFTC, basically deciding whether a coin is a security or commodity has a lot of ramifications for how it's traded, how it's custodied, et cetera. So I'm curious how you're viewing the future outlook on legislation and what are some things we can see coming down the line?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of major categories for crypto legislation that are being talked about in DC right now. Maybe we could start with SAB 121 today because there was actually a vote in the House Financial Services Committee. And maybe, sir, do you want to talk a little bit more about what that exactly is?
Yeah, so the SEC, which is a securities regulator, basically put out guidance about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And what it does is it changes the accounting of crypto assets that are held and custodied by banks and other institutions, and essentially makes them liabilities instead of assets on the balance sheet. This, in essence, just makes it really expensive for banks to custody crypto, and so it creates a disincentive for them to participate in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, there was a vote today. It was a bipartisan vote. All the Republicans voted for it. 3 of the Democrats did. I think later this year, it's very likely that both the House and Senate will vote on that legislation. I think most people think, though, that this particular legislation that repeals SAB 121 will not be enacted into law because the vehicle that's used is something called Congressional Review Act resolution, which is typically used when an outgoing administration issued regulation and then a new administration comes in and the new administration wants to get rid of it with Congress. So this vehicle is considered a bit more partisan, but there is a lot of underlying support for changing SAB 121 and potentially repealing it as well.
And what about market structure? So SAB 121 was voted out of committee today, but there were 2 bills earlier this summer that were also written and then voted out of committee. That's kind of the first step in legislation to going to a floor vote and eventually making its way to the president's desk. So curious what you're thinking about that bill, why it's needed, and what its future is.
Yeah, so market structure reform is huge. There's a need for clarity within the industry about exactly who's regulating digital asset securities, who's regulating digital asset commodities, and there are a whole host of like parallels within traditional finance that if you were to take some of those principles and obligations that these financial institutions have, it arguably would make the system safer and honestly more inviting for people to participate in the marketplace. So that particular bill, it's called the Fit for the 21st Century Act, was passed last year in committee with bipartisan support, and it will likely be on the House floor sometime around March 31st. Now, I have to caveat that. There's a lot going on with Congress right now. It's likely that it'll get pushed back a little bit, but I do know it's a priority of the House Republicans to move forward with that bill in the near future.
What do you think the Senate is doing on it?
Well, obviously, there's been a lot of good work in the Senate. Lummis and Gillibrand have their own bill. But I think that particular bill will not get a standalone vote. I think with most of these bills, I think there's going to have to be a big package of crypto, various policy crypto and legislation, or various crypto legislations that are combined together that may pass either later this year, even though there's a low chance, or sometime in the next few years.
It's interesting. There's often pairings in different bills in order to make them more palatable, if you will, for different members of Congress. And one of the biggest issues that we've seen on the Hill is like money laundering and the belief that crypto is being used for illicit finance purposes. Often we talk about a kind of compromise in which people on the Hill really want to pair AML policy with FIT policy, like the Fit for the 21st Century Act, or even stablecoin legislation, because they're quite concerned that criminals are running rampant on blockchains, that they're using it to fund nuclear weapons programs, et cetera. A lot of these conversations, I think, that scare members of Congress are happening behind closed doors with the intelligence community, think CIA, FBI, et cetera. But I do think Congress also learns a lot through headlines, and after Hamas was claimed to have used quite a bit of crypto last fall in October, there was a Wall Street Journal article that came out that's really shifted a lot of the dialogue subsequently in legislation. So I'm curious what legislation you see coming as a result of this kind of headline reading and the kind of scare tactics that might be used in Congress.
Yeah, in the Senate there are 2 prominent bills, DAMLA and CAN-C. Both of those bills are kind of a tone center, I think, in DC right now of like the fact that it's very clear that Congress wants to do something on illicit finance related to crypto. But I also anticipate in the near future that there should be a bipartisan illicit finance bill coming out of the House Financial Services Committee. And then there's also likely to be kind of a Treasury guided bill introduced by leaders in both the Senate and possibly the House, where they ask for, where they grant Treasury maybe some extraterritorial jurisdiction over non-U.S. Stablecoin issuers, and these are stablecoins that are backed by U.S. dollars, and then also giving secondary sanctions or giving them more authority to do more with secondary sanctions. So I think both of these, both the Treasury-led initiative and what's going to happen in the Financial Services Committee, are going to add to the debate to the other bills that are already out there.
What do you think are the misconceptions around AML and crypto that is really being talked about on the Hill?
Well, I think it goes back to some of the education that we were talking about earlier. I think there's a lot of data out there, and when you dive more deeply into the data, it provides a clearer picture as to the extent that the extent of the problem. We're an OCC bank. We are subject to the Bank Secrecy Act. We have like over 50 compliance workers at our bank working on all these issues. It's something that I think the industry needs to take very seriously, but it's something it's developing. There are going to be more bills, and I think if any of it's going to get enacted into law, I think it's probably going to have to be paired again with one of these other bills, maybe stablecoin legislation, which we have not yet spoken about.
Yeah, so stablecoins was the other bill besides the Fit for the 21st Century Act that was passed out of the committee, the Financial Services Committee, last July. And essentially what it does is it sets up a framework for the federal government and state governments to allow different companies to issue stablecoins. Those that are backed by reserves usually will be custodied in banks. So it doesn't touch anything like DAI, like a decentralized stablecoin. It's really focused on centralized issuers and giving them different options and pathways to create a federal framework and not go state by state and collect licenses. And hopefully that, if you're in Iowa and you're compliant in Iowa, that if you're using the same stablecoin in New Jersey, that you don't have to worry about a whole nother set of regulations, obtaining a second license. It's just a tedious task to do all 50 states. So hopefully this will provide a better pathway, and I'm curious what you think the chances are of it passing this year.
Yeah, so this is something that the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee, Maxine Waters, and then the chairman, Patrick McHenry, have been working on for the last 2 years. They marked up a bill last July. It didn't get as much bipartisan support as originally anticipated. They've been working on this bill since then. Ranking Member Waters has said that they're getting closer. Secretary Yellen has said that she would like to see a stablecoin bill. I think this is probably the best candidate to be paired with maybe illicit finance legislation to move in the near future. There are still differences between Republicans and Democrats over the state and federal pathways for issuers of stablecoins. But I don't think those differences are insurmountable.
The upcoming election, do you think that will play into the success, like potential success of the bill?
So I actually think that regardless of who's in the White House, you're going to have bipartisan support for legislation. I know some people might say, well, what happens if like Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, and the House, or Democrats do? I think what you really need to move any legislation you want as a party in Congress is you need those three things, but you need a supermajority in the Senate, which is 60 votes. And I think it's highly unlikely, almost impossible for any party to get that and also have the majority in the House and the White House. So you're going to need at least probably 5 or 6 minority members of the Senate to vote for crypto legislation. So I don't necessarily think for legislation that a different president really changes anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious how you're thinking about whether if there's a divided Congress or not. So I don't know if you want to explain what a divided Congress is and what it means for, you somewhat explained what it means for legislation, but just elaborate on that for the audience.
Yeah, a divided Congress is when like you have like the Senate and it's controlled by one party and then the House is controlled by another party. You could just say divided government in general, and you would mean that like the White House is one party and there's at least one other party controlling one of the other chambers of Congress. And I personally think that it is true that there are a number of Democrats and Republicans that want to see more clarity in this space. Whether it's the chairman of the Banking Committee, who's a Democrat, whether it's the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, which is a Republican, their staff and these members are working hard on this.
So we've talked a lot about a few bills that, like, of anything that's most likely to happen. It's the repeal of SAB 121, stablecoins, illicit finance, and market structure with FIT. What one are you most excited about? Or is there some new legislation that you think is really needed that no one's really discussing yet?
I talked a lot about illicit finance earlier and the potential for these new bills coming. I think that's something that the audience would be interested in because there are ramifications potentially for DeFi, for unhosted wallets, for infrastructure, and how that debate over illicit finance plays out could have ramifications for all the people that are here today talking about the great things that they're building.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concern on the illicit finance front for sure. One thing I'm really excited about, and it's not the most sexy topic, but it's tax. I think tax is really important in our space, especially because crypto right now is treated as property. And for that reason, anytime you're switching coins, technically you're supposed to be taxed on the transaction and keep track of what price you bought that coin at, what price you exchanged it at or sold it for. And I think right now there's a lot of questions in tax on what's the best way to report your taxes, why is it so difficult, et cetera. And I think Congress can do a lot to step up there. I'm just curious what other thoughts you have for developers in particular and how they should be thinking about what's happening in DC as they start to build or think about creative new ideas.
Yeah, I would say another policy area that's quite fascinating that has huge implications that I think developers should think about are everything with stablecoins. The ability of stablecoins to potentially export U.S. dollars throughout the world is huge, and I think people at the highest levels of our government, whether it's the Federal Reserve, Treasury, White House, are thinking through all the implications of that. So any projects associated with that, I think, is of particular interest to the government right now because controlling the U.S. money supply is something that the government obviously cares a whole lot about. Did you have anything else you want to say for the developers?
Well, I'm curious on stablecoins. There are a lot of other countries that are working on it. I'm curious how you think the U.S. is positioned just generally in legislation and thinking about crypto compared to some foreign jurisdictions.
Yeah, good question. I think you could definitely argue that we're behind some of the other countries on stablecoin legislation. However, I think it's really important that we get it right. That's the most important thing. And I think because our leaders in Congress have already done so much work on this and we are that close, I don't think it's going to hurt us so long as we, in the next couple of years, can get a stablecoin bill through Congress.
That makes a lot of sense. If you are a developer, what would you say is the one agency you might not know about that you should know about?
That's a good question. Everyone in the government is talking about crypto. The IRS hired 2 people just the other day that are focusing on crypto. So you would be surprised. Then there are blockchain projects going on throughout the government. But yeah, it can be anyone from the IRS to the National Economic Council, the Oversight Committee in Congress. There are a lot of people engaged in government on this now.
It's funny, every once in a while a new agency comes out of the woodwork that I'd never heard of before, and I feel like I've been in DC for a while and we've seen them all, but recently the EIA, which is a part of the Department of Energy, basically is a collection of data. That's what its main purpose is. They put out a request for all Bitcoin miners to submit information about their energy use, et cetera. And it's just interesting how every part of the government, to your point, is starting to think about crypto. So I know we're almost out of time. I'm curious for what you think will happen in 5 years.
I think all the bills that were just mentioned, I think some form of them will be enacted. We'll have much more clarity. And I think the United States will be in a very good position for all the financial innovation and technological innovation that is being worked on here at ETH Denver and talked about.
Amazing. Well, I think that concludes our panel. Really appreciate everyone for coming here today, and feel free to ask us questions afterwards.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the takeaways from the latest SEC enforcement actions on crypto asset space. I know, among the audience, it's not just lawyers. There are contributors, developers, engineers, people interested in the space, investors, anyone, really. So I want to make sure this presentation is nothing dry and too lawyerly. Hopefully you can all walk away with something useful and something for you to keep in mind. Obviously, the latest U.S. regulatory landscape is on everyone's mind. So with that, very briefly about myself, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm an attorney at DLX Law. We are a boutique law firm focusing exclusively on blockchain Web3 matters. I personally have a background from general corporate and M&A matters. I guess like many of you here, I decided to pivot into Web3 because it's very interesting, exciting, and here we are all looking at this together. Quick legal disclaimer, the information here is very general information only and is not intended to be legal advice, and there is no attorney-client privilege relationship being formed by accessing this material. So when we talk about SEC jurisdiction, SEC only has jurisdiction over any activities, matters, companies if there is a security at issue. Looking back at all of the cases brought by the SEC, there are really two categories of cases. One is brought against issuers. Those are what we know, those actions against Ripple Labs, against Terraform Labs, and early on from Telegram, against Telegram and Kik. And the question was simple. Was there a Section 5 violation that the issuer entity, which is the labs entity, that had a securities offering unregistered in violation of the Securities Act? Later on, more recently, mostly last year, SEC initiated a few actions against intermediaries. Those are not the issuer entities, but rather exchanges in the crypto asset space, as I'm sure you're aware, against Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, and those platforms. So the key question underlying both categories are what are the securities at issue? Are the crypto assets themselves securities? And or is something else? Is there some other securities transaction going on, and whether SEC has a jurisdiction over these matters? So with that, we can unpack the first category of cases first. The first category are those what we call issuer actions. Those, if since you're sitting here, I'm sure you are familiar. There is a very well-known test called the Howey test, where there are 4 prongs. It's the investment of money, common enterprise, rely on efforts of others, and expectation of profits. The courts over the past 76 years really have been applying that test to many different kinds of fundraising activities. It is generally true that a company that sells something to raise money in order to build out a platform, some projects, is conducting a securities offering. That has been the case over the past 75 years. It's not new to crypto. It's not unique to crypto. And that's what we see in Telegram, in Kik. The court in those cases applied the investment contract test to the underlying transaction, and decided that, okay, Telegram and Kik in those cases violated securities law. That's also true for Library, which was more recent last year. And as of that was July last year, we all know that there was a decision issued in Ripple that the court took a more nuanced approach. It looked at the XRP sales by Ripple Labs, not by doing a more nuanced approach by splitting them into 3 different categories of transactions. Number one is the institutional sales by Ripple. And those type of sales were really not that different from any other fundraising activities we see in the past. That's consistent with Telegram, consistent with Kik, and was found to be violating Securities Act. The second category, called programmatic sales. It was anonymous programmatic sales of crypto asset, in this case XRP, on different exchanges. Those transactions are blind bid-ask transactions in a very deep and active trading market. And the court considered various factors and concluded that buyers of XRP on those trading platforms do not intend to fund the business of Ripple. They don't know who are buying the tokens from, they don't know where the funds are going to, and they come to the conclusion, and the court come to the conclusion that there is no violation of the Securities Act. And the last category is the other distribution of XRP tokens to employees and third parties. So this is I would not say innovative, but at least very different approach taken in Ripple Labs versus the earlier cases. However, very soon in the same court, a different judge in Terraform Labs rejected that approach. He was very clear and he declined to analyze different types of transactions or draw any distinction between different manners and sales of these assets. Instead, Judge Rakoff in the case was very clear, saying that transactions in which UST, Luna, and some other crypto assets were investment contracts, and so the crypto assets were securities. I think so. Unfortunately, there is no clarity by the court at this point on this issue, and that leaves open the question: are the fungible tokens themselves security? In the Ripple case, it was clear XRP as a token is not in itself an investment contract. While in Terraform Labs, the judge also was clear, saying that because transactions in which UST, Luna were investment contracts, those assets themselves were securities. So that's where we are on the first category of SEC actions against issuers. The open question is very fundamental and instrumental to the second category of cases, which are enforcement actions brought against exchanges. As probably everyone here knows, SEC already initiated actions against Coinbase, Binance, and Kraken, and settled with Bittrex. As an example for Coinbase, they charged Coinbase with operating its crypto asset trading platform as an unregistered national securities exchange, broker, and clearing agency. In the complaint, they alleged that 12 tokens listed on the exchange were securities, and each of these charges really turned on the question whether the crypto asset themselves were security, independent of any fundraising activities. There is no issuer entity involved here, or the crypto assets securities themselves. Very recently, that was in last month, in January, during oral arguments, the SEC staff did concede on that point by indicating that a given asset may not be a security, but there is an unclear, undefined ecosystem ongoing that constitutes an investment contract and the security. We will see if the court in the case agree and whether it buys this argument, agrees or disagrees. But that said, there are these few different actions are currently ongoing in different circuits. That means the different circuits may not agree on the very same question, and if they don't, we still do not have any clarity, unfortunately. Along the same lines, that as of last week, a plaintiff, which is a project called Ledger X, which has developed its own crypto asset trading platform called Legit Exchange, initiated an action against SEC seeking injunctive relief from the court that they don't need to register with SEC as a exchange, broker, or clearing agency. That's the exact opposite position that SEC is taking in the Coinbase case, Binance case, and Kraken case. This plaintiff strategically chose a different circuit. So we now have the same legal issue being actively litigated in 4 different circuits, and we will see if any if these courts agree on this very same issue. A few other issues was actively litigated in the case or was actually presented in the exchange cases are one of them, the first one, staking. The SEC charged Coinbase for failing to register the offer and sale of crypto asset staking platform. As you may know, as I said earlier, the Howey test is a four-pronged test. SEC alleged that the staking as a service program meets all four tests, all four prongs, and thus was an unregistered securities offering. The second one is a Coinbase wallet. The SEC alleged that Coinbase operated as an unregistered broker by offering its wallet application. We will see, of course, it turns on the same issue, whether the crypto asset that users are able to trade by using the Coinbase wallet or themselves security. If not, then SEC has no jurisdiction, it's no securities law violation. And last one is a stablecoin. That one is a little surprising to many people because SEC here alleged that BUSD, the stablecoin, was offered and sold as an investment contract and therefore a security. It's important to note that BUSD was offered and sold with a variety of different factors ongoing. They were very heavily marketed for its profit-generating, profit-making opportunities. It was very heavily touted by various APYs, yield, different programs that allow users to earn passive income. These factors are unique to BUSD. We will see if the court comes to any conclusion whether BUSD itself is a security and or the offerings of BUSD as a totality of circumstance is a securities offerings. So with that, there are two categories of cases currently ongoing, right? One is those against issuer. Unfortunately, and it's not very clear, as I just said, the current status. Judge Torres in the District of New York in the Ripple case took a very nuanced approach. She analyzed different types of transactions and applied a Howey test to different types of transactions of XRP sales. While Judge Rakoff in the same district court took a different approach. He considered all of the sales of UST, of Luna, different tokens as a whole, and come to a conclusion that, all right, they are securities offerings and thus securities. Just as a background, the SEC is currently is expected to appeal to the Second Circuit. We will see what the appellate court comes to conclusion, and until it arrives at the level of Supreme Court, we will not have a final say we won't have a final say from the court what's the status or what's the correct approach of Howey analysis. And in the second category of intermediaries, as I said earlier, it really turns on the question whether crypto asset themselves, whether XRP or a different crypto asset is itself a security. These cases right now, because they're being actively litigated in different circuits, any decision in one circuit is now binding on cases in another circuit. So also same thing, until we arrive at the Supreme Court level, it's unclear and it's remains to be seen what's the latest landscape, what's the latest status of the law on this issue. So I know that this does not leave anyone here with a lot of clarity. I understand that. So with that, I think, as a lawyer, a lot of projects, clients, non-clients come to us and ask the question, how can I be compliant? I want to, we are developing some cool project. It's in the Web3 space. We want to be compliant and we don't want to get SEC attention. I think it's important, with that, it's a piece of advice, not legal advice, but more like a piece of general informational for your advice is to really focus on what's the project's building, what's the mission of the project, what's the goal of the project, and not be distracted by the price of token. We understand the crypto token is a many times a fundamental part of what many projects are building. And we want to advance the technology, and we understand that is part of it. But at the same time, some unnecessary attention can be drawn if there is some very aggressive marketing focusing on crypto asset token price. We know what regulators do not like is seeing that a retail user who does not understand anything about blockchain or crypto invest some money because there is very heavy marketing, very aggressive promotion with some rocket ship emojis on their tweets, and end up losing their money. That's what they don't want to see, and I'm sure that's many of you here do not want to happen either. So really, when you are doing the marketing, when you're doing the promotion, think about what's the goal of the project, and really stay true to yourself what we're trying to do here, and what's beneficial for the community, for the people who are interested in the technology. With that, I know this setting is not very great for questions, but at the same time, I want to tell you that I will stay here for for some time, and we can, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, discuss. Also, this is my contact information. Feel free to email me. We always want to know what people are building and get to understand or learn what's the latest in the space and really learn from each other. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, also from my side for the next talk about regulation. Now we will talk about MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, which is the upcoming EU regulation. And I will try to make it as hands-on as possible so that you really kind of understand and get a feeling of what EU crypto regulation looks like. My name is Martin. I am based in Europe, in Vienna. If you want to connect with me, here's my Telegram handle and my LinkedIn. If you want to wait for that until after the talk and see if I deliver, you can do so too. You will have my contact info at the end again. I would like to talk with you today about three topics. First of all, kind of what is MiCA, what is the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, and why is this actually a thing that you should pay attention to? Then operating a MiCA licensed business, what does it actually mean for you? And at the end, also, MiCA is a regulation and it brings challenges, but it also brings opportunities. And I would like to have a look at those opportunities together with you. So first of all, what is MiCA and why does it make sense to have a look at MiCA? MiCA is, like in the EU now, we have 27 member states, and in each member state there's a different set of regulations for crypto, which makes it extremely difficult to operate a crypto business in the EU as of now. With MiCA, this will change because there will actually be a uniform EU regulation for crypto assets and for crypto asset businesses. So MiCA could actually be a golden ticket for you to enter the EU market with access to more than 450 million people. So that sounds pretty good, I think. And who will be actually affected by MiCA? Or in other words, what is the scope of the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation? I like to think about it as kind of two pillars. On the one hand, you have the pillar of issuers of crypto assets that fall under the scope of MiCA. There could be issuers of unbacked crypto assets, asset reference tokens, and e-money tokens. And what those tokens actually look like under MiCA, we'll have a look on the next slide. And service providers in the context of crypto services. So those service providers could provide classic services such as custody, exchange for crypto funds, exchange for fiat, or also portfolio management, advice to crypto, or anything like that. And both of them, like service providers that provide any services in terms of crypto assets and also issuers of crypto assets, will have to comply with the regulation of with the rules and regulations set forth in MiCA. Equally important as what is in scope of MiCA is what is not in scope of MiCA, and in a lot of cases, this might even the more challenging question, kind of how do I structure my business in a way that I do not fall within the scope of MiCA, especially if it's an edge case. I put on a slide here a few of the buzzwords that you probably already heard, and kind of everyone says it's outside of scope of MiCA or it's inside of scope of MiCA, and I think a lot of those things actually depend on the concrete use case. And the most important thing here is DeFi. On the one hand, MiCA is a regulation that actually addresses issuers and service providers, so like centralized entities. That means that if you operate a business that is totally decentralized, you do not fall within the scope of MiCA. But then the question arises, what is actually decentralized in the sense of MiCA? And that is a very hard question to answer, because MiCA just outlines in its legal text that if you are fully decentralized, you do not fall within the scope of MiCA. But no one actually says what full decentralization looks like. So, like from a practical point of view, what we've seen in practice is that regulators tend to look at the different cases, kind of whether there is, for example, a labs corporation that gets revenue from the project, and then also kind of has a management, pays salaries, etc. If those things are there, and if you have like this corporation, if you have like a body that works for the project, it might be the case that regulators will see that, or will argue that your project is not fully decentralized. So what we did here in practice is had rules and regulations in place to really make sure that decisions are being made on a fully decentralized level by way of governance votes or something like that, to make it very clear to the regulator that projects are decentralized and therefore do not fall within the scope of MiCA or existing supervisory regulation. Another thing that is not part of MiCA is actually security tokens. So everything that falls under the scope of TradFi, of traditional financial instruments, will not be covered by MiCA, but by existing regulation. Equally important is also the exemption that mere tech providers do not fall within the scope of MiCA. Here again, it very much depends. For example, if you provide a custody solution, whether you have, for example, the private keys and you hold those private keys for someone else, then you might provide custody services under the scope of MiCA. Or if you really only provide the tech, then it could be the case that you do not fall in the scope of MiCA. And another interesting question or another interesting point here is NFTs are as such not in scope of MiCA, but here again the text outlines only NFTs that are also non-fungible from a legal point of view and not only kind of non-fungible from a tech point of view. So that's again the question that you have to look at it from a legal perspective again. So I already touched upon that there are 3 different categories of crypto assets under MiCA. So what do they look like? What do they entail? We have asset reference tokens and e-money tokens. I mean, e-money tokens are pretty simple. Tokens such as USDT or USDC fall in this category. And asset reference tokens are tokens that reference the value of an underlying or a basket of different underlyings. So that is actually something very interesting, because this could be a token that has an investment function and is very similar to derivative products of the current financial TradFi sector actually, and could be an interesting investment opportunity also, or business opportunity also for the crypto space. Both of those tokens are fully regulated by MiCA and require you to have a presence in the EU, whereas other crypto assets such as like L1 or L2 coins or also other utility tokens are less heavily regulated and do not necessarily require you to have like a headquarter or any kind of presence within the European Union. However, if you want to address and want to actively sell this token also to EU customers, or want your token to be listed on an EU exchange or EU broker, you will have to notify your token as well to one of the EU regulators and draw up a white paper because crypto asset service providers are required to do so. And so for that, just like from a practical point of view, it makes sense if you think about selling a token also to EU customers to comply with white paper requirements in the first hand already also from a MiCA perspective, because it's not that difficult to comply with these requirements, and you are then fully set to also sell your token to EU businesses. What's the timeline for MiCA? Just very briefly. The rules and regulations for asset reference tokens and e-money tokens will be applicable as of the 30th of June this year, and all of the rest of the regulation will be applicable as of the 30th of December this year. So everything around crypto asset service providers or utility tokens or other crypto assets will be effective as of the end of this year. So you might now wonder, or you might now see that maybe you have a project that falls within the scope of MiCA or potentially could fall within the scope of MiCA, and wonder what is it like to fall in the scope of MiCA? What do people actually think about when they discuss MiCA next steps? We see actually that almost all of the projects focus on these 3 questions as well. Kind of the first one, if you are a crypto asset service provider, should I still go for a national registration as a virtual asset service provider, for example, now, and then transform this virtual asset service provider registration into MiCA, into a crypto asset service provider license. Here, it very much depends on what you're doing and kind of how fast you want to be active in the EU, whether this still makes sense, or whether you should just simply wait for a MiCA and go straight for a MiCA license. The second question that we discuss with a lot of different projects, and this is probably the more interesting and more important question, is the choice of jurisdiction. Because I actually said at the beginning, the cool thing about MiCA is that we have like one uniform regulation throughout the whole European Union, right? So we don't have like 27 different sets of regulation, which is true, but it still makes a difference where you're headquartered and where you have where the project sits locally. And some of the things that we discuss with projects here in terms of the choice of jurisdiction is what are the customers that you want to attract? For example, if you want to go for TradFi customers or institutional investors, the reputation of the jurisdiction that you're choosing is actually quite important, especially in terms of AML compliance, for example. Kind of, do I go for a country where I know that they stand for high AML compliance, or do I go for a country which does not stand for AML compliance? And then another big question is the expertise of the competent regulator. Kind of, are there already a lot of crypto projects in this jurisdiction? Does the regulator that I have to explain my business model to know what they're talking about? Or do I have to kind of start from scratch and explain every single thing to them? Then probably also kind of the number of applicants and also the personal resources that the regulators have, because again, this will very much influence the speed of your application. Last but not least, access to talent pool. Kind of, is it a jurisdiction or a city where there are already like a few fintechs based, where there is a lot of a big talent pool that I can access, or is it like a city where people like to relocate to, or is it hard to attract talent to the city? And last but definitely not least of like the big bullet points is like tax considerations, of course. Like from corporate tax rates to the possibility to obtain tax rulings, other tax efficient structuring options, and also R&D and other subsidies that your project might be eligible to. So what we see in practice in terms of jurisdiction is that a lot of projects are either focusing on Estonia, Malta, Estonia, Malta, the Netherlands, Austria, or Ireland are kind of jurisdictions that a lot of people are discussing with, and kind of where they are in the first talks. And why is that so? Especially Austria and Netherlands might be surprising to some of you, but this is especially the case because only the Austrian and the Dutch regulator published a roadmap to MiCA a few weeks ago, where they already outlined kind of when they will accept MiCA applications, that it is already possible to pre-align documents with the regulator, so that you can actually be one of the first ones to obtain a MiCA license. So because if you think back, MiCA will be applicable for crypto asset service providers, for example, as of end of this year. And if you already have the possibility to pre-align documents now with the regulators and submit your application in the second half of this year instead of the 30th of December this year, it is very likely that you will get a license much earlier than in other jurisdictions, which is why quite a few projects are now considering Austria and the Netherlands for their headquarter for the MiCA operations. If you now, after this talk, for example, kind of wanted to start a project and kind of think, well, maybe I need to follow MiCA, or maybe I need to actually apply for a MiCA license, where do you stand, or where do others stand? We see that there's like two categories, like EU-based crypto companies, which are at the end of this this circle, kind of usually already having a MiCA gap assessment, drafting documents already and pre-aligning those documents with the regulators where possible. Whereas projects that are not based or not headquartered within the EU, they are typically at the beginning of this circle kind of starting to focus on MiCA. They have the strategic decision that they want to go for a MiCA license, or actually are still evaluating whether it makes sense for them to go for a MiCA license, or whether they would try to operate without a MiCA license and maybe not actively engage in the European market. Last but not least, we have been talking about challenges. We have been talking about kind of that you have to do a lot of compliance also and with MiCA. But MiCA does not only bring challenges but also opportunities. So I would like to briefly also touch upon these to show you that regulation is not all bad. Like on the first point, I already touched upon this. MiCA can actually be your golden ticket to the EU with a 450 million people market, which makes it pretty easy to really sell your projects or your services within the EU. Then secondly, there are also now the possibility to offer new products under MiCA. We already briefly talked about the asset reference token. Think about kind of a token that references like the value of gold, for example, like a gold token. I mean, there are already projects that do that, but so far it's not quite clear how that works from a regulatory standpoint. And under MiCA, those products could actually be structured in a way that they fall under the scope of an asset reference token, and then they could be marketed within the EU on this basis. So that is pretty exciting. And another thing is also that, for example, leveraged asset reference token are a thing. So there might be a possibility to really have like leveraged tokens within the EU as structured under MiCA. Also, with MiCA, crypto just becomes, so to say, more legit, because it will be easier for crypto projects to obtain banking licenses, access to banking services. This is actually explicitly also outlined in MiCA, that MiCA licensed entities should have it easier to obtain to obtain banking services, and also institutional and more traditional investors will be attracted to crypto and will actually engage more in crypto products. And maybe just one more thing to point out here is the collaboration with TradFi. Because what we see is also that MiCA does not only hold the possibility for you to actively service the whole European market, but really also to form collaborations with credit institutions, with other like investment firms, etc., because they are really now getting interested in tapping into the crypto market now that it becomes more regulated in the EU. So that is definitely also something where we see that there is a lot of potential with MiCA, and that's why I'm pretty excited about MiCA. I hope some of you are too, and I would be happy if we stayed in touch. So now you can decide if it was worth connecting or not. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them afterwards. And yeah, happy to discuss.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Neptune Stage. I'm Matt Cutler. I'm founder and CEO of Block Native, and we're going to spend about the next 20 minutes or so talking about real-time observability in the Ethereum ecosystem. It's pretty interesting. The past few sessions that have been on the stage are all about sort of the regulatory environment, and this stuff has a lot of implications for the regulatory environment. And this is going to be a session where I'm not just going to show you some stuff. I'm going to encourage you to start to experiment on your own. So this is not necessarily going to be a happy tale. Okay? There's a graphic novel from 1986, which is almost 40 years ago, called The Watchmen. And The Watchmen is about a dystopian view of a society where there's superheroes who are basically like really powerful but kind of regular people with flaws. And they're not just always good all the time. They're kind of self-interested. And they kind of get out of favor, and there's this whole saying about who watches the Watchmen, because they kind of have godlike superpowers, but they're not necessarily always used for good. And this is a little bit of what's known as foreshadowing for the current state of affairs on the Ethereum network. Because there's a number of superhero-like entities that have sort of godlike powers. It's not entirely clear if they're always being used to everyone's benefit. And this is why we need observability. So we're going to talk about observability, some new capabilities, new data, new pathways, actually do some live demos, and then do a little bit on looking ahead. So what is observability? Observability is something which actually comes out of the cloud apps world. And it's this idea that you can look inside a live system, know all the individual states, and try to understand what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing. So imagine you have a cloud application, right? You have your own code. It's interfacing with other people's code. There's some open APIs you're using various cloud providers like Google and Amazon, and then it slows down, and you're like, why the hell is my cloud application slow right now? You need observability to be able to see inside to see why it's behaving the way that it is. And so, oh, you can't see that, there's a cloud there. But like this is the classic observability challenge. You know, why? Oh, that's why, right? So now we have this new class of application. It's called the Web3 public blockchain. It's composed of an incredibly complex array of individual technologies, abstractions, modular systems, infrastructure, network, peer-to-peer layer. And observability here is the ability to sort of see inside of that and understand not just what it's doing, but why everything is happening the way that it is. And this is what we specialize in, our project Block Native. And what we tend to find is the theory of how this stuff works can be actually quite a bit different from the reality of how it works. And that's why observability is so important. So we're trying to see like what's happening inside of Ethereum, and like the nice way, the happy version is like, it's a watch. Look at this fancy watch face. Isn't that clever? And we turn it over, and like there's this complex inner working, but it's really neat to see it all work together. It's jeweled, it's so perfect. But the reality is more like this, that there are users paid more than $60 million in fees to settle down to the base layer last year from L2s. Malicious MEVs costing users billions. OFAC violations, which we have to deal with. Each violation carries up to 30 million in fines and up to 30 years in jail. And these are all things you need strong observability to deal with and manage. And under the covers, there's this whole system called MEV Boost, which is basically how blocks are produced. And this is an observability dashboard called MEV Boost Pix by Tony from the Ethereum Foundation. And it says, MEV Boost blocks over the past 14 days, 90.9% of all blocks produced are outsourced to this thing called MEV Boost. Now, many of you may not be familiar with MEV Boost, but it's like where blocks come from. And the interesting question is, why do 9 out of 10 blocks come not from the validators, but come from this third-party system, this very complicated third-party system? And the reason, there it is that the ecosystem of MEV Boost produces blocks that are 5 times as valuable as internally generated blocks. So there's a very clear economic incentive if you're a validator or a staking pool to outsource block production to this MEV Boost ecosystem, because you basically make 5x the rewards and then can offer greater APY and attract more stake, right? Great economic incentives. Except 86% of all of those blocks produced in the past 7 days were built by 3 builders. 3 builders produced 86% of the 90% of blocks. So call it 80% of all blocks. By the way, this is called rated network, what we're looking at here, another observability dashboard. So that's not so decentralized. That 86% of the time you got to talk to one of these 3 builders. And who are those builders? Well, now we're looking at RelayScan.io, and we can see right here they're called Beaver Build, Titan, and rsync Builder, also known as Wintermute. And over the past 7 days, they have together built more than 86% of the blocks. Do you know that for your transactions to get on chain, you got to work with them? What happens if one of these entities doesn't like you? Or more likely, one of these entities is running a strategy that competes with what you're trying to do. Not great, right? And significantly, why do they do this? Why are builders doing what they're doing? This is the builder profitability of those 3 builders over the past 7 days. And I know it's sort of hard to read here, but it's 1,483 ETH in profit to the builders, to these top 3 builders over the past 7 days. And the math here is about 1,500 ETH, about 3,350 USD ETH, about $5 million per week, or $260 million per year is being generated in profit from the builder network that undergirds how your transactions get on chain, okay? And so the economics here are pretty interesting. There's a lot of money flowing around, and the question is, what are the builders doing? How does this stuff work? Is your transaction being treated fairly? And again, this is why we need observability. So when we say who watches the watchman, it's really who watches the settlement, okay? So we have these builders who talk to relays, who deal with stuff for the public mempool. There's private order flow, searchers, and validators. But there's also like now intents and bundlers and paymasters, and pretty soon we're gonna have blob pools and bid pools and swaps and L2s and L1s and censorship and bridges and delays and OFAC. And these are all realities of the network today. All stuff that involves ephemeral data layers. There's no permanent record of what's going on, all of which contribute and combine to determine settlement. Which transactions get included on the chain and in what order, okay? And so this is a pretty interesting set of challenges if we're trying to build a credibly neutral foundation for the next economy. If we're trying to build something where it's not a 2-lane system full of have and have-nots, dominated by information asymmetries, like we have in the traditional financial system, but is basically a level playing field for all the participants. And so this is why we have really worked hard on this notion of observability to say, hey, we need to be able to see what's going on. Not just really high-end skilled people or really experienced people, but pretty much anyone on the network should have access to these systems so that you can decide for yourself, you know, are you being treated fairly and what's going on? And so we've recently introduced this capability called ethernow.xyz, and I encourage you to go check that out. It's a new capability made possible by a grant from the Ethereum Foundation, and it's basically a starting point framework that we're building out now, and we're going to be inviting the community to build out as well. And there's some terms down here. And it basically tries to do 3 things. Answer the question, what's happening on Ethereum right now, okay? Which is an interesting problem, because if you were to want to know what's going on right now, where would you go? What is the thing or system or service you look at to see what's going on in real time at this moment? And one of the things we discovered was there's not really good resources for the general population or the researcher population, and so we're making these available. Then a real-time transaction explorer to basically allow anyone to be able to view the public mempool, sort of an Etherscan-like interface, but for the real-time ephemeral data layers underneath. And then all of that written down to a historical data archive measured in terabytes so that researchers can replay historic events and do net new research. And so we're going to dive into that. So I'm going to switch over here, and this is what's happening on Ethereum right now. This is ethernow.xyz, again made possible by a grant from the Ethereum Foundation. And we can see the current block number, or the last block number. the amount of ETH burned in the last block, the current ETH USD exchange rate, and the total value staked. And then over here, of course, it's always a live demo. See, I might need to refresh this. Or maybe all of y'all are going on the network right now and it's slow. Well, there should be a countdown timer over here that's giving the countdown to the next block, the gas price of the current base fee, the number of marketable transactions in the mempool, the percent private in the mempool, and then basically these things like the current value of the ETH transfer value in flight and the current stablecoin value in flight, the current DeFi swap value, and the number of optimistic L2 transactions. I'm going to try this. Oh, let's see. Is it going to go? I'm on the Wi-Fi. Come on, baby. This is always the way of things. Whenever you do a live demo, you always have a network issue. Well, it's going to be a little less fun then. OK, so if we look into this, it's more fun if we do it all live. Luckily, I have some stuff put up here. We can then click through and we can look into, see, I'm hoping this is going to live. It's not coming through. We can look into things like the transaction journey. So this is now we're looking into the public mempool, and we can look at the story of individual transactions when it entered the mempool, and then its journey through. So sometimes, usually they're pending and they're replaced, but often, or sorry, they're pending and they're confirmed, but then they go through and they actually get really interesting when people start to swap them out for new transactions, and you can have these really interesting and complex journeys that go all the way down to being confirmed. We can look inside the batches of optimistic L2 rollups, and we can see not just when something like optimism writes down to the L2 to the L1, but we can look inside and see the transactions themselves that make it up. So if you're a user of optimism or a developer for optimism, you can then programmatically be able to show to your users basically every stage of the transaction journey, from what's happening on Optimism itself to its ultimate settlement on Ethereum L1 underneath. I'm going to go back here. I'm trying one more time. Let's see here. It's not going to go. OK. But what starts to happen is interesting. So we have this notion of public transactions that get transmitted to the public mempool. You can also have private transactions. Private transactions are transmitted directly to builders and get included in blocks without ever being broadcast to the peer-to-peer network. And the reason why I'd want to do that is you're, say, a searcher who's trying to affect ordering. So basically, you want a certain set of transactions to be included in a certain way, or you have a large trade that you don't want to have front run, or you're participating in an NFT drop and you want to make sure you get included. There's basically sort of back doors into the network where you can transmit transactions privately to these builders, and they can then insert them and they just appear on chain. And so this utility is the only public utility for watching private transactions, because basically what happens is these private transactions show up on chain out of the clear blue sky. They never appear as pending. But we start to see weird things as well. This is a block. This is block number, just so I can read it out, 18721577. Most blocks have 100 to 200 transactions. This block has 5. They're all private. And basically, a block has a gas limit. You're trying to fill it up to about 50%. This block, it's used 2.55%. So a builder basically decided, hey, there's 5 transactions that are really important that I need to get in now, and I'm just going to put them in and not anything else. I just want to make sure that there's no other interactions between transactions going on chain and what I'm doing here. And so basically, this block is a massive underutilization of block space. The only way to get included in this block were to then transmit privately to this specific builder. And the interesting question here is, why did this builder do that, right? And I say this because the interesting thing here is, these tools, this observability, you can watch these blocks as they go by. Now, typically, a block is anywhere from 10 to 15% private these days, but every now and again, you'll see one that's a lot higher percentage or has a weird construction, or the ordering is strange. And then the question is, why is that happening that way? What is the incentives? What's the reason behind all of this? And this is what observability is all about. It's all about this notion that we can get into this. I'm going to try this one more time. See, it's just a Wi-Fi connection. Let's see. And really get into what's going on. And the whole point is you don't need to be a PhD to do this stuff. Now with this generation of tools, anyone can get in and make this stuff happen. Ugh. So it's partially behaving, it's partially not. We have support coming in all of this for EIP 4844 as part of Denkun. So you can see here we're looking at type 3 transactions on the Sepolia testnet, and we'll be doing that on mainnet, hopefully right at the launch as well of the hard fork. And then we have this historic mempool data archive, which enables researchers to go back, download terabytes of data potentially, and go back through and investigate anomalies. And this has been used for some pretty interesting purposes. I'm going to switch back. My Wi-Fi is not cooperating to my deck. And here's an example of some research that we did using our archive, which basically helped figure out that one of these superheroes, builders, was not providing MEV rebates that were promised to end users. Okay? And so there's a process by which you submit transactions, and if there's MEV, you're due a rebate, and there's a whole bunch of agreements that are made associated with that, but there's no observability inside of that, meaning you're just kind of trusting these actors to do the work that they say they're going to do, and there's a bunch of assumptions in the stack underneath the covers, and it turned out in this case that there was a builder that had a back-running bot that was misconfigured and was basically accidentally stealing refunds from transactions that flowed through them. And the only way that we were able to detect that this was going on, to notify the wallet, to work with the builder, to identify the bot, and to fix everything was because of the observability infrastructure that we have and because of the use of research and archive there. And so today, as we look at the complexity of the network, as we look at the number of actors in the network, and we think about, okay, what if one of these is misconfigured? What if one of these, the trust assumptions associated with it, combines with a different set of trust assumptions? Does that create an edge? Does that create a profit opportunity? Does that create a data leak? Most of the time what we have seen is where there's problems, it's not malicious action. It is just something not behaving the way that it was expected to do. But as the amount of value flowing through the network increases, the economic incentives to play games here goes way up, okay? And so this is why this notion of observability is so important. And as regulators start to look into our world and say, hey, is this fair? Or is there market manipulation happening? The presence of observability and the number of people who are participating in observing and being witness to the network, those of you who are watching the Watchmen, I think will really help say, oh yeah, this is a very transparent network. Oh yeah, this is very well understood. Oh yeah, this is self-correcting. And so this is why we care very deeply about this topic and why I encourage you to participate in this process as well. There's been a whole bunch of research that's been published based on our data, both publicly accessible dashboards, a lot of tweet activity out there, research papers from folks like Uniswap and others, and more. So if you're an academic researcher and you're looking for something new to discover, we know that there's a ton of new things to be found in this data set. We're a relatively small team. We're good at collecting data, but our data science capability is limited, so this is why we're opening it up as part of what we're doing. And there's new stuff coming online all the time, new tactics, new bots, new strategies, new protocols, new capabilities in the network like 4844 that are going to be whole new research vistas moving forward, which we're super excited about. So this is why we're building this stuff out and why we think observability is a really critical topic for the ecosystem right now, and we want to encourage as much participation as possible. If you want to start your observability journey, go to ethernow.xyz, join our Discord. We'd love to hear from you. We're trying to make this stuff better all the time, and really appreciate everybody being here today. So I'm Matt from Block Native, talking all about real-time observability and the unexpected inner workings of Ethereum. Thanks very much. Cheers.
GM at Denver 2024. Hi everyone, my name is Bianca Buzea. I'm head of DevRel at Luxo, also the founder of DevRel Uni, and today I have with me some awesome DevRel panelists. Maybe we start with a round of intros. Emily, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay, cool. I'll start. I'm Emily. I work in developer relations for the Linea team. That's my introduction.
I'm Nader Dabbit. I'm the Director of Developer Relations for Eigenlayer, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm Jenks. I have the lowest rank or job level in this panel, I think. Not a head, not a director. I'm just DevRel at Filecoin Foundation.
Awesome, thanks everyone. So for today's topic, we'll be covering developer relations, accelerating Web3 growth and innovation. And I think that's specifically important for an ecosystem such as the Web3 space, where there are so many protocols around, so much variety if you want. It's important to have like a strong developer community, a very good developer experience in order to have developers stick around. And in order to do that, you need DevRel people. So with that in mind, I would like to invite you to kind of define how do you see DevRel when it comes to Web3, and why do you think DevRel people are kind of crucial of making developers stick around a certain ecosystem?
Yeah, I guess since I'm sitting next to you, I'll start. I saw this question and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can answer this question because I have never done DevRel in Web 2. Right, so my first experience as a DevRel was in Web 3, but I think if I had to guess, and I'm comparing this more against like my background as a software engineer in Web 2, is there is an element of like, I think Web 3 is changing so much, and like if I like as an engineer, I imagine also as like a Web 3 DevRel, there is a need to be a lot more flexible. And I guess work in a fast-paced environment, right, is kind of the catchphrase. Alongside probably just like very unique kind of, I guess, what do you call it, ways of thinking. We are a very permissionless network. You have like the meme community, you have the super hacker community, and like Web3, I'm imagining addressing those like very distinct kinds of groups of people is like a tough job, but a fun job to figure out.
I think that with, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay. I've worked in Web 2 and Web 3 DevRel. It seems like Web 3 DevRel is different, mainly because of the network effects and how strong of a, I would say, bond that developers end up having with the protocol that they build on and become comfortable with. And then the network effects extend beyond just the protocol becoming successful, but they also kind of go into security because you have a lot of developers building on a network, you have a lot of apps building on it, you have a lot of people maybe like participating as a validator or an operator on the network itself, and then the network becomes secure because a lot of value is locked into that network, and it's kind of like this snowball effect. So for instance, if you look at Ethereum, there's a very strong network effect that has happened there. And then if you try to launch a new blockchain, you're kind of asking a lot for a developer to kind of like leave that ecosystem because they have so much kind of already involved within that ecosystem. So that's kind of the main difference is with Web 2, I don't know, it's just the network effects are there, but they don't seem to be quite as strong.
I agree with that. And I've had 5 years of DevRel experience. 3 of them was in Web 2, or a traditional SaaS company that's trying to turn themselves into a platform. And then two of my last years are for Web 3. The biggest difference I feel like is DevRel has a better kind of has a first-class citizen seat in Web 3 projects. And the reason why is most of the blockchain projects or crypto projects build primitives that developers need to use. And typically it is a global system that allows other people to build things on. And whatever problems that their users are solving are actually localized regional issues. So you really need to have DevRel people engage to developers, which are mainly the users of the project, and then engage with them. If you think about a traditional Web 2 company, like a SaaS company, they don't need DevRel until they try to turn themselves into a platform or build APIs or SDKs. They realize, oh, wow, other projects as DevRels, they look good on stage. We should do the same. We should win the hearts and minds of developers. But it's only when they have achieved certain mass in their user adoption when they start to do that. But Web3 does it completely reversely. If you think about that, Web3 companies have, before building a single line of code, they have users already. They have followers already. So they understand that community is their asset. Developers is their important customers. So they understand the value of DevRel. So I feel like more valued here in Web3, even though it's a tougher job.
Maybe a follow-up question to that. I agree, like the open source element, it's key, and also the composability. Do you think because of the composability, people in Web3 are, let's say, less competitive, like protocols with each other?
I'm sorry, I don't think I heard the question all the way.
Yeah, can you repeat? Yeah.
Do you think in Web3, because of the composability nature, protocols are less competitive with each other versus Web2, and they're kind of interact better?
Web3 project are open by default. It came from, I think, a lot of open source ethos. So I think inclusivity is quite good here, and most of the projects are building assuming there is no border between, they're not making for a specific country or region. So most of the projects sort of are inclusive natively, and people talk about collaborations a lot. I feel like it's much easier to actually know other, including competitor projects, if you think they are, much easier. It's much easier to have a conversation and sometimes even collaboration with.
I will say to answer that question, maybe the spicy take is yes, I think protocols that are direct competitors are competitive with each other. But I think because we are in Web3 and in general, the ethos is very much building things together. We are competitive in a collaborative way. I think I see this especially, so I'm on the Linea team. We're a ZK roll-up, right? Amongst the cryptographers, when I get to kind of sit in their circles, it's really funny because, I think on the outside, people see it as very much how do we capture mind share, which is true to an extent, right? But then there's also kind of the underlying thing of research in general is very much hinged upon copying each other's work and then making it better, right? And I think to that effect, it's not that competitive because if you're doing something really cool, actually let me build on that, let me ask you questions, and everyone is very open with the information that they have. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think that there's that we as people that are working in this space, and DevRel at least, don't seem to be competitive with our friends. Obviously we're working on things that are often competing with each other, but I don't see any negative types of engagement on social media or in person. I don't really see that sort of thing. But the teams are, definitely competing with each other hardcore. And often you'll see teams launch something that is almost completely unnecessary. A million of those things already exist. They, instead of collaborating with what's already out there and trying to make it better, want to monetize a new token because it's very simple in this space. So they do that, and then they hire people to go advocate on behalf of that product. And it just doesn't make sense a lot of times, the product itself. And therefore, the competing product doesn't really differentiate. So I think that's kind of the main difference that I see in Web 2 and Web 3. I feel like most of the Web 2 companies truly often have something to offer that's different. But I think often in Web 3 we see people launch something just because they can make money off of it.
Yeah, when we were in Lisbon last year in Web Summit, I think the event organizer put us and Polkadot really separate, because they think we're in Web3, we're competing against each other. We want to be as far as possible, but really what we're after is actually network effects. All the projects that are after that. So we like to be cluttered together, even though if we are sort of competing in protocol level.
That's a good take. Maybe we shift a bit focus. Do you have specific examples where DevRel teams have kind of unlocked growth and innovation within certain protocols with different initiatives?
I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but I feel like it's pretty obvious, Patrick Collins' course and its relationship to Chainlink in terms of unlocking the community and the mind share and market share that Chainlink has right now. I mean, it's a fantastic product, right? But there's, I think, something very tangible about your first tool or your first introduction to something, and like it kind of clicking, when you want to build something with the price feed, like, and the very first thing you think about is like during my journey, Chainlink is what I used. I think that is like the canonical example, right?
Yeah, that's a great example. Another really good example was Alchemy. Back 2 years ago, they had just an incredible DevRel team, and everyone went from using Infura to using Alchemy almost like overnight. I mean, not everyone, but it just seemed like that narrative shifted like within 6 months, and it was 100% due to their relentless like content creation and DevRel work. That team has now kind of moved on, and I don't see it as like much right now, but people still use Alchemy based on what happened 2 years ago, and I thought that was just kind of interesting.
Well,
Also, Alchemy's great, and Infura's great. They're both great.
I'm really excited today because my example is sitting right next to me. Nader Dabit is my celebrity in DevRel. So yeah, I think your DAB example was first thing that I looked into when I started building on Ethereum. So that took a lot of inspiration from your videos. Thank you for that. I think DevRel's job is to, so DevRel is no different from, DevRel is, I think, is a perfect combination of geeking out, like doing tech stuff, and marketing. And marketing people always know that the quicker you get people hooked onto your product, the better you sell, right? But developers are a special kind of customers where they have very short amount of time, less patient, and they hate being sold. So what you can do is to make them fall in love with it is build a really quick guide to make them fall in love with your product really quickly. So developer guide, digestible content like Nader Dabit's, and then make them feel like they're superhuman, they're better than all the other people in the planet. So I think if you can achieve those things with that, you can help with the ecosystem growth or developer community growth a lot.
I agree with that, and also, yeah, indeed, I think the educational element that DevRels do plays a crucial role and has enabled multiple protocols to be very successful because of their strong DevRel teams. Maybe we also look at some other community building techniques that you guys use or engagement strategies that you would like to share that you either did you, implement yourself in the past or you saw out there in the space of other teams executing?
Okay, I guess I'll just keep going first because I sit here. I actually think this is a really interesting question, especially from like a layer 2 perspective that just launched. So I guess background history, right? I used to work on the Truffle team, which was very much like developer focused. The success of it was based on like pure developers. But then I guess I switched over to the Linea team, right? And it's not just developers. Now I had this sudden like new ecosystem of like users onboarding, right? And so I think there is an element of I started to kind of lose my identity in terms of who I was trying to serve because ultimately I want Linea to be successful, but Linea is not successful without devs and users, right? And so when it came to community building in the very beginning, when it comes to ecosystems and especially chains that launch mainnet, your number one priority is finding dApps because users will come to use dApps. If there's no dApps already on mainnet when you launch, it's like a dead ecosystem. So kind of for the past 6 months since mainnet, which was in July, my primary focus was how do I elevate these like existing builders who have teams who are already looking for product market fit, kind of understand the Web3 industry, get the eyeballs and capture the attention that an L2 can get, right? And I think we are at a point where our ecosystem is developed enough that I feel very fortunate that my team has kind of allowed me to say, forget, revenue, whatever. Emily, you can start to focus again on individual developers and people who are exploring the space. Maybe they never deploy a dApp and maybe they never bring us revenue, which is totally fine, right? I think that's already being taken care of by our growth team and our business dev team. And now DevRel is coming into play where I'm cooking on something right now. The headliner is called continuous engagement. It is going to be frog themed. I'm going to stop here, but like follow me on, or follow Linea, and you'll find out something is coming soon. But yeah, continuous engagement I think is the biggest piece of like how do you identify who your community is, and then strategies to make sure not just when you talk to them, but what happens afterwards.
I'm going to speak to like a new thing that I just learned that just kind of like came to me this week, almost like just hardcore realization that I noticed someone that was doing DevRel in an incredible way. but I'll step back for a second. I wrote a blog post called "Building High Impact Developer Communities," and it's pinned on my Twitter profile, Dabbit3. I've had at least 20 or 30 very high-profile companies like reach out to me, asking me just to like spend 30 minutes to an hour talking to them to kind of help them with their DevRel team, just based on that blog post. And it's been very impactful for my career, and it's been really helpful, I think, to a lot of folks. But if I was to name one new thing that I've learned, there's this person that I work with now. Her name is 13-year-old VC on Twitter. She's been running Jesse's Hacker House for like 2 years or longer, I don't know. But I never really knew too much about how that was organized. I did go speak there about a year and a half ago, but now that I'm working with Jessie, and I've kind of seen her like for a while, but I kind of learned the whole strategy behind Jesse's Hacker House. Now she leads the ecosystem team at EigenLayer, very successful, but she now has this network of all of the most cracked devs in Web3, basically on her Rolodex. They line up to come hang out at the Hacker House. They give talks there. It's like a very high signal group of folks that she's kind of created. So I think like maybe thinking of that as an approach, instead of like spending $100,000 to get a booth here and talk to random people walking by, maybe have like some approach like that where you have like this really big, cool house where people can come and sleep and stay for free. They have food that comes every once in a while. You have some really cool talks there. And then like as you become really well known, you can kind of like curate the types of folks that can stay there for free and things like that. And you just end up meeting one-on-one like some of the best devs in the world.
Phew. Well, if I buy that ebook, would you sign it for me with your wallet?
Sure.
Also, I'm going to go back and ask my events team how much we spend on our booth.
You'd be surprised. It's not just the booth, it's also like all of the people that come just to hang out at the booth, which I'm not saying they're not important sometimes, but I think if like that's the only thing you do over and over and over, you should kind of like switch it up.
Anyone can be DevRel. And that's kind of one of your point, right? So, yes. So we took a more systematic approach in growing ecosystem. We had a top of the line, amazing hackathon operations, or we call them builders operations team before. It's two people team, or maybe 3 or 4 now, but they've done a great job collecting a lot of data around different funnels of developers, and we compare them. So for example, in 2021, we have, for the sort of early funnel of developers, we actively engage with education platforms, I think 2 at least a year for major programs. And then we obviously have a lot of docs, a lot of videos created, workshops. But we also reach out to hackathon organizer, developer conference. We basically did not say a lot of no's to proposals. We went to 74 hackathons or sponsored 74 hackathons around the world in 2021. As a result, we got 1,600 qualified submissions. So we actually go through their code and make sure they didn't just do a read from IPFS, this kind of a utilization in their logic. They have to be pushing something to the IPFS network of Filecoin, using Filecoin storage helpers in their code to qualify, or use a FVM contract or something like that. So we got incredible amount of data on how well each platform performed, so that in 2022, bear market, less budget, you can't do much. But we do know which kind of platform give us more yield, so more qualified submissions. So in 2022, we just focus on the ones that really helped us with a smaller budget, but still can make a lot of impact on that. For middle funnel, we have grant programs. So in 2021, we gave out, I think we approved 100 or so grants and committed to the community $13 million in USD. And then for late funnels, we also have a very amazing accelerator team that worked with, I think, 12 VCs in 2021 and help 100 or so teams to raise funds. Because we see the success of a program, of a project going through ecosystem, developer ecosystem or builder ecosystem, we see the success being successfully raised and being able to have the fund to continue that project. So that's our approach to it.
Kind of building on what Nader said earlier about Hacker House, what other initiatives you would say you would like to see DevRel teams executing more? And on the contrary, what initiatives you would like to see DevRel kind of getting rid of or not focusing that much, let's say?
Okay, my turn again. I mean, like, maybe people will hate me for saying this. I think hackathons, I agree with Booths. Consensus loves Booths. I'm going to be very frank here. Are horrible ROI. Like, number one, I do think hackathons are incredibly valuable from the perspective of building a community, like getting people onboarded in. But from a, I guess, DevRel perspective, when I think about ROI, I think about hackathon opportunity cost, right? And it's talking about reach. When, you know, like, I think one thing that we didn't do a great job of last year, at least from my perspective on Consensus's hackathon strategy, was we met a lot of amazing devs there. We didn't have anything for them to do afterwards. So like kind of the base package that we would do is like I would bring them onto a call or something or highlight what they had worked on at the hackathon. But even then, that's only like 1 month after. So I guess you can kind of talk about like what does it look like to incubate them past that, right? So from like a Linea perspective, what I'm really excited about, especially with regards to like inspiring individual developers, is like how do we give them consistent opportunities to just build and break shit and have fun, right? And I think like Superfluid had a great thing with our wave pools, and I think that's kind of the model that we're going to go towards. It's just like giving out like really small amounts of money. Definitely, because I think when they get bigger, there's a bit more of like a grant bounty hunter vibe versus when they're small and just like a continuous way of saying like, hey, I built something really cool this month and next month and whatever and ever and ever, over and over again. I think it's a really great opportunity to do that versus like, let me take the time and energy and manpower to like go and fly to an event. Because it's opportunity cost, I guess, in terms of money as well as just like burning out your employees, right, is like a big part that I think also probably DevRels who travel a lot experience. Or maybe it's just me, I don't know.
I think like one thing that I've learned in the last few years with Web3 DevRel is like if you can do one really, really high impact virtual hackathon a year that you actually spend a lot of time, thought, and resources putting it into, you can reach a lot more people with just less resources, but everyone in the world can participate, and you can get a ton of people like engaged and involved, and it'll be more impactful than like 10 in-person hackathons if you do it really right. I mean, there's a lot of people that do like these one-off virtual hackathons where it's just kind of a second thought, but if you actually really, really, you know, spend a lot of time making it a real thing, it actually does really well. We did one at Aave before I left. We had like 360 submissions, which was really, really a lot for us. It was an order of magnitude more than we ever had really seen at an in-person hackathon. And it was less money than we typically spent in an in-person hackathon. So 10x return. I would say like you do one of those a year and you do maybe 6 big in-person hackathons a year, and that's kind of it. Like she said, like you end up getting burnt out. You're on the road. You're not actually doing any real work. The work that you're doing isn't that scalable. Even though the in-person stuff is really important, you don't need to just do a ton of it. You do kind of balance it out more than a lot of companies are currently doing today, I guess.
So yeah, we did focus a lot on numbers, but what I want to say in DevRel, a lot of things can't be measured, or it's very hard to measure and hard to put a value on it. The qualitative feedback from developers is also very important. One of the success story in Filecoin ecosystem is this company called Secure Finance, which they're trying to do derivative on Filecoin chain, but also they also are interoperable in Ethereum and BTC. So they participated a Filecoin hackathon 3 years ago, had the idea, received hackathon prizes, and I think they either applied for a grant, wasn't successful, or did get some grant. I need to check this, but they successfully sort of pitched to investors, did a raise, and now they're in their Series A. So it's, I mean, we can focus on numbers, and a lot of projects do want numbers only, but what's equally important is some of these quality engagements that your DevRel people have with the founders, and you only need 2 or 3 of them that can be the popular superstar project in your ecosystem to make it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that they're important to do, but like if you do one in every region, one really big one in every region, you're hitting like the whole world, and then you're not. So there's these people, and I respect the hell out of them. Actually, I would do this shit if I was a little younger, right? But they basically go to every hackathon and they just win prizes and then they go to the next one. But they're not actually continuing to build on those apps after they leave. And it's really, I would say, not a big ROI for the people that are companies coming in and hoping to get those builders to build something significant. Now, often some of those people at some point decide to just continue on a project. They do build and build something great out of it. But I would say for the most part, a lot of those folks are kind of just, winning these hackathon prizes and then going to the next one, which is fine again. But if your target is to build out the next billion-dollar company on top of your protocol, those might not be the folks that are that have the same goal. So you want to find the people that goals align with what you're trying to do, I guess.
Yeah, I do want to say also in terms of hackathons specifically and how you measure them, projects submitted is probably the worst number that you could measure. I think what I'm really looking for, especially now as we look into 2024 in terms of how I want to change, where I see Linea DevRel going, is I think a few things, right? The first thing is just how often are you continuing to build? And that's going to be something you have to do with GitHub scraping as well. But I think people forget about maybe one other type of person where it's maybe you don't start your own project, but how many of the developers did you interact with actually get a job in Web3? So maybe they're not contributing as a founder or something, but how many people did we land that became an engineer and something like that? And I don't hear that a lot. I don't know how you would actually capture that information, but it is something that I want to find out a way.
Hackathons are addictive, don't you agree? You code for 2-3 days and you win a few $1,000s, and it's like drug for developers. And Web3 hackathons are most potent for developers because the excitement. I actually met a few really good hackathon goers that deliberately do not want a job because they enjoy being in a hackathon.
I agree that this is a challenge, kind of incentivizing people after the hackathon to stick to the ecosystem and continue building. I'm curious, what would you say are some of the best practices, or what did you use and kind of worked for you in the past to kind of incentivize those people to continue to work on the projects even after the hackathon?
I guess the standard way normal people, companies typically try to encourage that behavior is through grants and things like that. Consensus actually, and I think this is a really interesting take, we don't offer grants. What we offer is sort of mentorship or access, right? So we have something called the Consensus Fellowship Program where we onboard people building their own dApps. We don't offer them money. Maybe they get money in the end, but that's not the promise. The promise is you leverage Consensus's resources, right? So in the same way, I think and this is kind of what I'm envisioning, what I want to do with individual developer teams as well as people I meet, right? Is onboarding them onto the Linea ecosystem, not as obviously as a developer, right? But kind of being on a chain is amazing because you meet so many different projects, right? We have a really strong ability to connect access. And I think the best way you can kind of engage with people after a hackathon, and again, I want to keep hammering maybe continue the project is I don't think that's really possible, but how do you continue to inspire, the builder spirit that they felt there? How do you continue to make them feel accessing that is easy? Because definitely accessing that spirit at a hackathon, amazing. You're not sleeping. You're I don't know. Everyone's there kind of a little bit crazy, so you can feed off that energy, right? But how do you move that moving forward? And I just am in a very fortunate position and role and company where we have a lot of resources to mentor them kind of afterwards. And that's kind of also why I wanted to touch about the job aspect, because we do talk to a lot of protocols that are deploying on Linea. They need engineers, right? How do I be able to take that connection that I have and give it to the people that I meet? Because I'm not leaving Consensus, right? So somebody else should take that job.
So not much time, but I would just say we find the best builders at these hackathons and we try to build and develop really great relationships with them over time. And if they need money, we try to get them money. And all the other hackers, we also keep up with them. But once someone really, really stands out, we just go out of your way to kind of make them happy, connect with them, hang out with them as much as you can, give them as much support as you can.
I think people who really needs your technology do not care about money. They will build on it anyways. And sometimes money can get in the way, grants can slow down certain things. That's from my experience. Same goes for customers.
Building relationships, I think that's a very strong element. Well, I would love to continue the conversation, but unfortunately, we're at the end of the time. Thank you so much, everyone, and also thank you to our audience.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, can I start, guys? Okay. So, thank you for the few people I see here, but still, thank you for being here. It's late, so everyone is tired, but I will be happy to present this to you. Basically, today I want to talk to you about the Web3 marketing odyssey and how does it feel to be a marketer in this space, and some tips and lessons that I've learned during my experience in the space. So, why it doesn't work? Sorry. Maybe. Okay. So, why I feel entitled to talk about this. Who am I? Let me present and introduce myself. So I am Italian, as you can listen to from my accent. I started my career in Web3 in 2018, so it's already 6 years. That seem probably like 20. I have worked with mostly DeFi projects, so I started with Aave, then Maker, then I've also collaborated with the Balancer, and now I'm currently the marketing lead for SummerFi, and I also help Rect and Stake Capital. In the meantime, I also founded Spaghettith, which is the Italian Ethereum community, together with Matteo. So, this is a small disclaimer before I start talking, because I will give some tips and pieces of advice in this presentation, but what I want also to pass is that, in my opinion, this space is still so young, and too young to talk about marketing experts, or experts in general, probably. So these stuff are true for me, and maybe also for someone else. But again, I wouldn't use the word expert. Sorry. Okay. This is us. So this meme represents me or all the other probably marketers in this space, where we have to deal with a lot of dramas, a lot of chats, a lot of regulatory constraints, no budget, low budget. When they need to cut something, is marketing as usual. Crazy communities. Sometimes you need to wear different hats, which is good, but sometimes you also need to wear the hat of babysitter, which is not good for the rest of the team. And so basically that's us, but it's challenging, it's stressful, but it's also very, very, let's say, yeah, we never get bored. And I'm messing up with this, sorry guys. Okay, so these are the 4 things that in my opinion are relevant for a marketer to do or to have. So the first is understand what we market. This is a challenge because sometimes you are market something that is quite difficult technically, especially in my DeFi space. But if you don't understand what you are marketing, you can't explain it to someone else, to your audience, right? The second is invent our own job and our own best practices, our own rules, which unfortunately can't be found in books. So we need to invent our job, do many different things, try and fail, and not get depressed, etc., etc. Then the third is constantly catch up and try to use Web3 tools, social, etc. What does it mean? It means that we are, guys, a a space. Web3 is a space which is still evolving as a family altogether. So sometimes it's easier to use Web2 tools in our job because the UI of the new Web3 social medias or Web3 newsletter tools or Web3 blog tools are not perfect, but we don't need to give up. We need to embrace the change, and we need to try to use as much as we can the Web3 tools also to do marketing, and then be proactive and talkative, meaning that we need to experiment. We need to, again, nobody, when you accept a job in this space, you don't expect that someone tell you what to do. You need to tell yourself what to do and do it. That's it. And talk with the team for your needs, but also with the audience. Be very loud when you need something and you need to tell something. And here are the keywords. So, in my opinion, there are three main keywords in our job. This is, again, what I have experienced during these 6 years. And these three keywords are sustainability, trust, and team. So I will go in depth for each. So sustainability, what does it mean? When you join as a marketer a Web3 project, probably they will tell you, oh, we need users, so you need to get as many users as you can. Grab people. So let's make an airdrop. Okay, yeah, that's not wrong, but then what? You can't keep going with doing airdrop, otherwise you're not retaining your users, you're not interesting. The main challenge is, the first challenge is getting user, and okay, but then you need to retain them, to entertain them, to convince them that they need to stay because your project is interesting and you offer them what they need. And so you this means having a sustainable marketing strategy. So get the users and then talk with the users, keep the users, and keep the conversation with the users interesting. So it doesn't matter if you release a lot of super good features if you don't communicate them correctly with the users. Otherwise, they don't find they won't find these features by themselves. Second is trust. So trust means, especially now in these recent times, I think that trust is fundamental. And trust means being transparent in everything you need to tell to the user. So from within the product, for example, I work in DeFi, so we have fees for something, and it needs to be very clear where is the fee, how much you will pay for this, and the risk you're taking. You need to be very clear within the product and also with the community. So when they ask something, you need to be very clear in replying, and also in the comms, PR and comms. For example, when something happens, you're hacked or whatever, the comms should be very transparent. Otherwise, the trust is broken. Second is consistency. So if you initially you define some values, right? Mission values that you want to represent with your project, with your company, then you need to be consistent in everything you do. So you're not, for example, you see that there is this fashion to publish memes which are a bit provocative. But your tone of voice is not like that. You don't change because it's fashion. You just stick with your tone of voice, with your values in whatever communication you give, and you stick with it, with this, because consistency will pay in the long term. The third is showing your face, which doesn't mean that you can't be anon. You can, but it's good to know who is behind a project for the users, for the community, in terms of like which kind of person you are. So if you want to stay anon, you can just tweet about your stuff, which is not always and only related to the product. If you don't, in my opinion, right now it's better if at least someone in the team is not anon and go around at events, speak at Twitter, in the Twitter spaces. Like, people want to hear your voice. They want to know a little bit about who is running the product they are using. The third is team. Team means not just the marketing team, but also the rest of the team. So right now in this space, we can't think in silos. So there is no, in my opinion, we are not enough there to talk about marketing team, finance team, product team, engineering team, all detached. We need to talk to each other. We need to be super interconnected. And it's quite surprising how the rest of the teams can help you actually in your marketing campaigns, in your marketing strategy. So, for example, when you have an idea, you can ask product to brainstorm with you to understand, like, together what is better to do, because you have different point of views. They have more technical point of view. You are more in touch with the users, and together you will the product will be better. You know, also in terms of marketing, and also when you need something, you need to ask. And also within the marketing team, it's very, very important to hire the right people. What does it mean? In my opinion, from my experience again, the values, the culture of the people you hire are more relevant than the on-paper capabilities, because a lot of stuff can be learned, and the values can't. So maybe you will spend more time in educating, in teaching this new person how to do this job, but then in the long term, this is way better to have someone who cares about the space, who cares about your product, who cares about the company and the team. In my opinion, is at least 70% of the value of someone who you want to hire. Then the key areas. So there are some, like, these are the main areas that we deal with in the marketing of Web3, but in general in marketing. So community, contents, PR and comms, events, and social media. Sometimes I see projects who just put attention on one of these. So, for example, there are projects who have super active Telegram groups and Discord servers, but they don't have any blog or no contents, no knowledge base. I can't find any documentation on their website. Or the contrary. Some project has a super huge documentation, and then if you want to reach out and talk with the team, you can't. The point of this slide is that all of these areas are super relevant, and every area has the same importance. Of course, there are some times where when you need to pay more attention and prioritize some of them. But in general, it's very important to keep in mind that every area is important. So the final remarks are three to close this presentation. So the first is that marketing techniques are evolving. This is very frustrating. It's very frustrating because you get used to MailChimp and then some Web3 thing come up and you are, no, I need to learn again everything. But we don't need to give up. So embrace the change because the tools are evolving, but maybe they are evolving in a better way. Then some traditional principles are still valid. For example, know your target, know your users is very important. So, like, try to study your target as much as you can is very important, and listen to your users, ask them questions, ask for feedbacks. Then, being snob in this space doesn't pay in the long term. What does it mean? It means that when a mini project, for example, with like 2K followers on Twitter ask you to cross-marketing something because you are collaborating, you are like, but yeah, you don't like put much attention. But that's wrong, because we need to help each other. And from one day to another, this project could be to K followers, and then you want to be remembered as the project who helped their growth, rather than the project who was like snobbing them, you know. So that's it for my presentation. If you have any questions, we have 4 minutes, but it was pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Okay, great. Are we ready? Excellent. Well, thank you everybody who came out for this. Thank you for everybody watching online. Thank you to the entire ETH Denver team and all the volunteers here this weekend. It's really wonderful to be here. My name is Karen Scarbrough. I am the Executive Director of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and today I am here to talk to you about our next moves and how we would like to help accelerate industry adoption here. And it's actually far from my first ETH Denver. I came out here in 2018 as a hacker. Far less people and less projects to talk about. It's really amazing to see what the city of Denver has done with this event, what the event team has done, what all the projects have done that have come out of this event. And that's definitely a model and a scale that the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance would like to model in terms of impact in the upcoming years of the aggregation of community and impact that you can have in the Ethereum ecosystem. So with that, let me take you through a little bit of what the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is and our history and where we've been the last couple of years. So we started back in 2017 with a couple of core companies that helped us in our founding establishment. We had names like Microsoft, Consensus, Accenture, and many others. BP, a former employee of mine, Microsoft, my also current employer. And with that, we actually had hundreds of members at the time, all joining around the ambition to integrate blockchain technology into enterprise and see where the technology could take the use cases that we had within enterprise to the next level. And much like many areas of technology in the economy in general, we have seen the interest wane and wax with different cycles that we've gone through. So certainly in 2018, post-ICO boom, and then seeing the ramp up in DeFi and stablecoins, we again saw industry take tremendous interest in the use cases and the new things coming out of the Ethereum ecosystem. And at that time, the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, in addition to the standards groups that we have and the webinars that we put on and the event presence that we did have, we really started talking a lot more about startup Web3 ecosystem as opposed to private blockchains and the differences therein. I recall at the time, Vitalik had a wonderful article that came out around the legitimacy of the public Ethereum ecosystem that I used prolifically within enterprise because it had really reached an exciting level of adoption and technical achievements that you could point to as real stepping stones in an iteration journey towards scale and plans for the ecosystem and Ethereum next. So another important step on our journey at the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance has also been the Business Readiness Report. And the initial Business Readiness Report came out in 2022, excuse me. And at this time, we had around 180 use cases across different enterprises. This 100-page plus report encompasses interviews, different charts and graphs of relevant data within the ecosystem. And happy to report that we published the 2023 Enterprise Ethereum Alliance Business Readiness Report with an additional 260 use cases this year. And another 100 pages plus of in-depth data and analysis and interviews of what's been going on in the Ethereum ecosystem. And it's an exciting time because again, we're starting to see from the hype cycle that happened last time, the legitimacy of the improvements around scalability, privacy, and other aspects of the Ethereum ecosystem that are again starting to track up interest within the enterprise community. So when you think about what's top of mind for enterprise and the lens through which they may view this ecosystem, a couple of different frameworks can come to mind, and one is overall general innovation for an enterprise ecosystem. And so when you talk about blockchain or Ethereum or zero-knowledge proofs or anything within that context, sometimes it can get put in a category against other big-name technologies. So you got interest here in quantum from the enterprise environments. AI has certainly taken a lot of precedence this year, things like robotics, but all of these technologies that enterprise can tend to look at through a lens of let's do a proof of concept, how is this going to differentiate our business model in the future? And that's where, with blockchain, similar to all these other different ecosystems, having the narrative around the readiness of this technology and the actual data to support it being at the proper readiness level is really important. So you can see, for example, I'll point out the statistic around AI being that 25% of C-suite executives are using this in their day-to-day working activities is a pretty strong indicator of the alignment and investment that will go into an enterprise actually adopting this and pushing it forward, certainly. So, what are we going to share as a blockchain Ethereum ecosystem to build the right conversation around why enterprise would be interested in this? And that really brings us to putting it in the proper lens of any enterprise IT environment, because at the end of the day, all those different categories of innovation are very exciting, but they're often not the core business of what an enterprise company does. So keeping the lights on, ensuring scale for your customers, proper user experience, and all those related bits are also very important. And this is where you get positioned against other technologies in terms of security, scalability, cost, privacy, regulation, all those different bits. So with that, and considering the lenses through which the Ethereum ecosystem can be more successful in enterprise, what we'd like to move forward with at the EEA is a mission to be the credible voice of reason that commercial entities can rely on for a clear understanding of the Ethereum ecosystem. And to do that, we want to create an environment to do business in Ethereum by bringing together enterprise leaders, startups, builders, and innovators. And this will be the journey that we start to take over the next year, and one that we've really been in for several years now, but amplifying the contact with the Ethereum community and the edge of innovation, yet the requirements of enterprise is something that is top of mind for us, and we really want to see transform in the future over the next year. So to give you an example of how we want to help clarify narratives and discuss the Ethereum ecosystem in context with industry, one of those data points that you can look at is the Ethereum daily transaction rate. And you can see in the DeFi up-ramp of 2020, 2021, we start hitting significantly higher transactions per day, and then we plateau. So if you have not taken the information in context, it can look like, well, where did Ethereum scaling go? We said in 2020 that we wanted to scale DeFi. We wanted to make it so that more users can use Ethereum. And the discussion around L2s, although very prominent here, may not be in other realms of people who are interested in this technology on a basis for using it within an enterprise that may not be living and breathing this day in and day out how we may all be here. And that's where we would like to more so showcase that against the daily transaction rate, how you need to consider that in context is the layer 2 ecosystems, which the Ethereum ecosystem hypothesized would help us scale in 2020, 2021, have actually achieved what they set out to do, and that now those layer 2 ecosystems are scaling Ethereum by a factor of 8.5. Last time I checked a couple of days ago. So it's an excellent presentation of how the builders in Ethereum had an idea about how they needed to solve an engineering problem, and they actually executed it, and it is displaying positive results so far. The other things that we'd like to bring to light as far as the advantages of the ecosystem and where to consider it in terms of sustainability and comparison in the wider blockchain ecosystem, also include things like client diversity. So this is something that, to my knowledge at least, although as this space grows, it seems to only grow more limited because there's so much out there. The Ethereum ecosystem is really unique in the approach to client diversity. And for those online or out in the audience who may not be familiar, this is that the Ethereum nodes that run the network exist in several different languages. And the purpose for that is that if the client in C goes down, then the client written in another language can pick up the ecosystem and carry it forward so we don't have downtime. So it's important that among all these different clients that run different types of languages with their nodes, that we have a balance between them and that the Ethereum ecosystem is supported. So you can see on one side with our consensus clients, we're doing very well. On the execution clients here, I know there's some red marks, but it was only just yesterday that Coinbase has also announced that they are going to start running a diversity of their staking clients as well, which is excellent. And then, the layer beyond that is that this Besu client on the chart here too is one in which you can run a private Ethereum network. And you can also point that to a public network of your choosing. So how wonderful of an on-ramp for an enterprise to potentially work with a client that can do both for them in the future. So that's another amazing way to introduce enterprise to some content that is unique to the Ethereum ecosystem and actually has a real amount of strength behind it as well when you consider all the options that you could do. And then another key data point that is top of mind for enterprise, particularly with all of the news headlines of 2022 that we all saw and just cringed a little bit. But the addressing of not only the OFAC sanctions, but things of the nature of scams and regulations and all that needs to be considered for an enterprise ecosystem to address. We hear the negative side and headlines a lot, but if you look under the hood, the block builders for the Ethereum ecosystem right now, actually most of them run a type of protocol that does not allow non-OFAC compliant transactions effectively. And there's a whole layered discussion here that I want to be very clear on. There's no favoritism for censorship here when it comes to enterprise, but the fact that you can prove that you can be compliant is actually a real benefit to the ecosystem because that needs to be demonstrated not only to regulators, but businesses who want to come into the environment as well and not put their core company at risk in trying this new technology. So that's another interesting data point. And then of interest to enterprise as well is where am I going to find the resources, the talent, the builders to be here with me and build and sustain a product that I do build. And for that number as well, we've seen positive trends over the last year in which the software development kit installs have increased 31% year on year. And if you also look into other key areas of technology, which are including zero knowledge these days, the ecosystem for that, if you looked at it 4 or 5 years ago, the accessibility to an average developer was far different in that you had to be much more of a PhD level cryptographer to access building a zero knowledge proof to fit in your smart contract to execute on an EVM chain. Now there's 4, 5, 6, probably more different languages that a strong developer who doesn't know ZK could come in and make a smart contract that can work in those ecosystems. So it's a great demonstration on how not only are more developers getting active in this space, but we are also building better tools for which developers can get active in this space. So when it comes to really articulating our next moves, besides just demonstrating some of that data to a wider ecosystem within the industry and to other enterprises that are considering multiple different options, more succinctly, we want to provide that industry data through items like our business readiness report, but also transition that into data that's consistent throughout the year. We usually launch the business readiness report once a year with that large 100-page report. We want to provide data more consistently for our enterprises. And those in enterprise may be familiar with names like Gartner, who have a high degree of credibility within enterprise ecosystems for the data surrounding innovation. We would like to be the Gartner of blockchain innovation for enterprise companies. And then what we're doing here as well, the presence at events. So making sure we come alongside those in the Ethereum community and also build a presence for our members in events specifically for enterprise. So this year, we do anticipate to have a lot more in-person events, be present in more places, and then also facilitate more webinars, both informational and informal, so that we can continue to provide both passive and active ways for our members to participate in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And in addition to that, we want to continue to provide viewpoints. So we do have standards groups and interest groups that have worked over the course of the lifetime of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. We actually, several years ago, even had an interest group around AI and blockchain, which actually stopped participation due to lack of interest, and I think we've got the interest back now. It's certainly one that we would like to revive. But not only that, we've got the DeFi risk management accounting paper that has just come out as well from one of our standards groups. We've got our ETH Trust that articulates ways to build a decentralized application in a secure way from start to finish. We've got our Ethereum training quality groups picking out the strongest courses for enterprise individuals to go out and utilize. So we really value the members that lead those, so thank you to them while I'm up here as well, and we want to see a lot more this year. And lastly, community. I articulated that we want to do this through events, but also making sure that you, an enterprise, as someone who is interested in blockchain and Ethereum for their business, that you have a community of like-minded people to pull ideas from, to learn from, and help accelerate the adoption within industry in general. So some recent highlights, like I said, were the Ethereum Business Readiness Report. And while I'm up here, a big thank you to the Ethereum Foundation for that. They helped us put that to, or helped us have the resources to do that. And it's been a tremendous benefit for the enterprise community. And the working group activity that I referenced, the ETH Trust group that we have just released their security level spec, and I believe version 3 is actually coming pretty soon as well. That one was released in December. And our DeFi group, DeFi risk management, or accounting management, yeah, that acronym always trips me up a little, but DRAMA for Enterprise Ethereum Alliance means DeFi. And we have also released the DeFi risk guidelines paper for comment. So I can share the link online and share this presentation. But those comments are open till April 15th, and we'd love to get more enterprise input on how those were articulated. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out. If you are interested in EEA membership, I've given you the path here. And definitely check out our business readiness report as well. So thanks, everyone.
before you go, you still